I've invited one of my predecessors, Mac Williams, to chair the meeting tonight because, as we know, he's a former ambassador to South Korea, and I think it's highly appropriate that he should take the chair this evening and introduce Ambassador Cho to you all and conduct the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Colin. It's good to be back at the front, not sitting down the back. Look, I don't want to take too much of your time tonight because we've come to listen to Ambassador Cho, who's really an outstanding representative of his government, an outstanding diplomat, and he has much to say that's very important to Australia. We're in the process, I think, in Australia of understanding that after many long years, particularly for people like Jeff Miller and my other former predecessors, Korea is beginning to achieve in Australian understanding the sort of place it should have. We have certainly in the white paper, which was just out recently, highlighted again the fact that Australia considers Korea to be one of our top 5 priority countries. Excuse me. And this year, of course, or next year, we'll actually both go onto the Security Council. So 2 middle powers in Asia will be working together to discuss a whole range of issues, but particularly Asian issues. Ambassador Cho brings with him a great deal of experience in both Korea's international policy, but also particularly Korean policy on the peninsula. It's a very important time in Korea right now. We're 19 or 20 days off election. We may see for the first time a lady president in Korea, which would be an interesting challenge. By the way, there's no debate about misogyny at the moment in Korea. But we have that. We have a situation where there's some interesting things happening in North Korea as well. We have a first lady in North Korea who's rather different to anyone else we've ever seen in North Korea. And I've just come back from Seoul, and the rumor mills are running hot that we might actually have the first baby of North Korea, which would change things enormously. But I don't want to gazump what Ambassador has to talk about, and we've asked him to talk about a range of issues in the relationship between our 2 countries, and also particularly on the peninsula. After the next election, whoever gains presidency in South Korea, the rumours again around Seoul are that there may be a little loosening in the attitude of the South towards the North. Not much, but a little. And that would have some interesting implications for ourselves, because we've retained a very hard-line policy on North Korea for a long time. But look, it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight Ambassador Cho. He'll talk for a while, and he's kindly undertaken to answer questions, and I'm sure that he will be very open, and also you'll find it quite informative. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mac, for your kind introduction, and thank you, Colin. Well, my name is Cho, Taeyong Cho. Cho is my last name, and I'm a Korea diplomat. I came to Canberra September last year, so it's been slightly over 1 year. I'm still trying to explore your huge country, coming from Korea, which is not the biggest country in the region. I now appreciate the expression was that the tyranny of distance that really is still in place in Australia. Well, it's been 30-something years as diplomat, and for quite a while I worked on the issues of the Korean Peninsula, especially security issues, North Korean nuclear issue. I've been the chief negotiator for the 6-party talks for 2 years. Not that 6-party talks produced a lot of laudable outcomes, but I had my experiences. And before the 6-party talks and after, I had been dealing with North Korea issues and also our relations with Washington. That has been my forte as a career diplomat, but now I'm getting really into the economic issues here in Australia, because the economic story between Korea and Australia is a very, very exciting one. So this evening, thinking that still Korea needs some advertising among the knowledgeable public in Australia, I'd like to give you a tour d'horizon or tour of horizon of anything about Korea. Introduction of Korea, my country, talking about North Korea, and then perhaps talking about relations between Australia and Korea. And then if I can do it, I like to talk about the kind of issues of common interest, like United States rebalancing towards this area, or the rise of China, the challenges that present to both Australia and Korea. So, first of all, I'm very pleased. It's really my honor to be here at the Glover Cottages. Colin explained to me the history about this place is really profound, and I'm very, very impressed. It's my honor to be here this evening. And after my talk, I like to impress upon you that there is a potential between our two countries still to be tapped on bilateral economic and tangible cooperation, on the working together about how to shape Asia-Pacific region as something that we also like, we all like, I mean, we both of us like, and also how we expand our strategic cooperation as both countries are middle powers. And middle powers meaning we try to punch above our weights, and both Australia and Korea have a history of doing that, and we have a potential to do that. So I'd like to share with you about this aspect as well. First of all, my country, the Republic of Korea. It so happens that North Korea is formerly called Democratic People's Republic of Korea. They love to have, they love to call themselves democratic always. So it's kind of a longer name. My country is the Republic of Korea. And my country is not a big country, it's a very small country. In terms of land mass, South Korea is similar to the size of Tasmania. But my country has over 50 million population, while Tasmania, I think, is probably 500,000. So you see that Korea is a very crowded place, and 3/4 of the territory is actually mountains. We all love mountains, but at the same time, when it comes to the space we can actually build houses, build something, it's very, very small. So I always think that Korea is probably the most densely populated country in the world. And for so many countries, except for immediate neighbors, China and Japan and a couple of others, Korea really made its name known in the wider world through the 1950s Korean War. That's not a very fortunate introduction, but that's how it happened. Before the start of the Korean War, actually, we were a very small, very quiet country away from the activities in the world. As a matter of fact, the United States administration, which sent troops to administer the Korea for 3 years after surrender of Japan in 1945, decided that after all, Korea should not be within the defense perimeter that they have to guard in the Asia-Pacific region. So all the US troops were sent back home by 1949. But actually, North Korean leader Kim Il-sung brought them back by invading South Korea. This is one of the ironies of history. So in June 1950, as you know, the North Korean forces of numbering 200,000 invaded in full South Korea, and South Korean forces, although valiantly resisted aggression, were no match for a professional North Korean soldiers, especially armed with tanks. And at that time, our forces didn't have anything to throw at the tanks. So some of them throw their bodies with some, the grenades wrapped around their bodies. But it wasn't quite enough to stop the advance. And first few months of the Korean War, the story of we moving backwards and try to hold on to the Busan perimeter. And American troops came in, you came in, and 20-something other countries came in. And after the landing at Incheon, which was very risky, but General MacArthur pulled it off in any case, 15th of September, and that cut off the supply lines of North Korean forces, and we moved forward, almost unified the country, whole peninsula. And some of our troops actually arrived at the border with China. That was in the middle of October 1950. And then war turned into I think Australians probably know better than me about this. Became a trench warfare, a classic war of attrition. So for over 2 years, while armistice talks went on, the two sides really conducted a very fierce battle, very brutal battle, for the purpose of occupying one high point, occupying one ridge. Hence, the names of something like Heartbreak Ridge came about. So that was the Korean War. In July 1953, months after the death of Grand Marshal Joseph Stalin in Russia, in Soviet Union, finally, we were able to come to armistice agreement. That was the 17th of July 1953. So next year will be the 60th anniversary of the armistice, which is rather important in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United States. What I'm saying is that for Korean people, the year 1950, when the Korean War started, is rather important and something to commemorate heavily. But I found that in Australia and other countries, 1953, when the armistice when the gun stopped blaring, is rather important. We are going to have many events commemorating the armistice of the Korean War next year. Right. So that's also the starting point of the strong bond of friendship between our two countries. I'm going to cover in more detail Australia's contribution to the Korean War. Going back to my main story, that is, so the war. So naturally, the pictures of the devastation of the war dawned the front page of international press. So unfortunately, Korea became known as a country of devastation, country of deprivation, and country of little or no hope. That was the state of Korea in 1953. So naturally, Korean people are very proud of the economic development they have achieved for 2 or 3 decades following the end of the Korean War. And we are even more proud because we have achieved this remarkable feat with no natural resources, with a burden of spending a lot of money in defense, guarding against the possible North Korean military attack. So we are very, very proud of our economic achievement. And we are also proud of Korea becoming a full functioning democracy. And also we became one of the middle powers who can do something on the global and especially regional stage. And going back a little in time, in the 1970s and 1980s, the phrase that we Korean diplomats love to share with you was the miracle on the Han River. And Han River is a river that cut across our capital, Seoul. And the phrase is modeled after, of course, the Germany's economic recovery after the Second World War, miracle on the Rhine. And so that's the story of economic development of Korea. And there are reasons proposed for the Korea's economic development. And one of them is a strong tradition of economic strong traditional education. So, in other words, Korean parents were willing to sacrifice today for tomorrow, spend their fortune on children's education. The second thing, of course, is a government-led, export-driven economic development strategy that was consistently pursued for 2 or 3 decades. And also open market and the business-friendly policies that was pursued by my government to put things in perspective. In the 1960s and 70s, I think a number of Asian countries and other countries in Africa and other developing world actually pursued a little different model that can be called as a self-sustaining model rather than open door policy towards foreign partners. And adding to that, I like to say that the strong national identity and nation building that existed in my country played a role in our economic development, and also the fact that we were divided and we had to overcome a lot of adverse factors worked actually for us, and it was actually a blessing in disguise. What I'm saying is that the Korean government at the time was challenged by North Korean government for the legitimacy of the whole Korean Peninsula. And it's not far-fetched because until 1973, per capita income of North Korea was actually higher than that of South Korea. So they said to us that let's compete in peace. Let's compete in terms of which regime will give a better life to the peoples. While our per capita income was lower than North Korea's, that was a big threat. That actually, I think, encouraged our political leadership to behave, to not get corrupted, and try to consistently implement good policies for the purpose of giving better livelihood to the people. Nothing much has changed, but since 1997, when Asian financial crisis hit Korea, we opened up our financial markets and we generalized whole our economies. That was the change. Before 1997, Korean development model has not relied upon the foreign direct investment. And there is a reason for that. And not economic reason, but I think it's more political reason. That is, when we tried to start our economic development in early 1960s or mid-1960s, if we opened up our market at the time, the only foreign capital who was interested in coming to Korea is probably Japanese capital. But for reasons of history, my government wouldn't allow that, and with a consensus from the people. So we basically borrowed money from abroad and used that as a seed money and develop our business groups, indigenous business groups, and indigenous manufacturing sectors. That's what we did. And then we guarded our financial sectors for about 20 years. But since 1997, we opened up our financial markets completely. Now we are, like other countries, at the mercy of the twists and turns of the international financial markets. So now Korea is world 15th economy, and just want to highlight briefly the key stats. And Korea is the world's leading producer of displays and memory semiconductors, second largest shipbuilding nation, second in terms of mobile phones, fifth in automobile production, and sixth in steel production. So this Korea has become one of the premier manufacturing countries, and Korea is very proud of being world's class ICT industry. Well, I don't have any PowerPoint presentations. It's kind of ironical for me to say that Korea is a ICT kind of forerunners in the world, but well, that's the case actually. And Korea is probably one of the most wired countries in the world, and one of the world's top internet download speed. And the last time we checked, we have 52 million mobile phones. That's slightly larger than the whole population of 50 million actually. And over 30 million are smartphones. So we are very, very wired country. Yes, we have challenges, of course. What are the challenges? I think we are too dependent upon export for economic performance, especially dependent upon big export markets, China, US, European Union, and Japan. So what happens in those countries will have huge impact on Korea's economy. Secondly, I think employment. Well, it's a natural phenomenon when your economy becomes advanced. The kind of industries, the kind of sectors that develop usually employ fewer number of people than before. So when it comes to quality jobs, we have a very, relatively fewer quality jobs, and that becomes an issue for a younger generation who loves to get into the labor market in my country. And also, it's the case that our young people, compared to our generation, became a little more choosy in terms of, jobs. And then the probably one of the most fundamental challenges, that is, Korea is getting old. Korea is a country of doing things very fast. We have a Korean word, 빨리빨리. You will hear the 빨리빨리 in Seoul, everywhere. And we do things very fast. And in terms of getting old, growing old, Korea is doing very fast. So now the population over 65 years of age is probably 15% of the population, much lower than Japan's, which is probably one of the oldest countries in the world. But come 2030, we go very close to Japan's levels, and come 2060, we will be basically at the same level of Japan. That means almost 70% of the population will be over 65 years of age, and that will sap our potential growth potential. So we have to do something about that. And of course, we have also the populist policies and social programs, and then we have a need as other countries to keep this financial health in shape, and that's our challenges. Let's talk about Korean politics. Well, Korea is a presidential system. We elect president every 5 years, elect National Assembly every 4 years. And this year, 19th of December, we are going to elect our new president. Presidents can serve only one term, 5 years. So current president cannot stand for re-election. We have two-way race. One, a conservative ruling party candidate. The second one, a liberal party or liberal opposition party candidate. And it used to be three-way candidate last week, but a very strong and popular independent candidate withdrew on Friday. So we now have two-way candidate, two-way race. Polls are extremely close. There were several polls taken over the weekend, and Park Geun-Hee, the conservative candidate, had between 40 and 48%, and Moon Jae-In, the Liberal Party candidate, they acquired between 38 and 48%, basically the similar level. So all the polls are within the margin of error. So that means the big question is, since this independent candidate usually gets about 25% or so of the votes, so which candidate is going to get the support of the independent candidate supporters of 25% of the voters? And so far, majority of the Ahn candidate, since this candidate declared support for the opposition candidate, move into the camps of opposition candidates, but not all, only about 45-50%. So the withdrawal of the independent candidate certainly worked for the opposition party candidate for sure, but nothing is decided, and it's actually game on from now on. Again, 19th of December, we're going to have elections. It's a one-up election, and there is no the second round elections. Just whichever candidate who gets the greatest number of votes will get elected as president. Okay. The policies. So far, the issue, I mean, the press is more focusing upon the personalities of the candidates and the past doings of the candidates. The policies will come forward from now on especially because they are going to schedule a TV debates. So TV debates will crystallize the policy differences between the two candidates. But to try to sum up, for average Korean voter, I think economy is the most important issue, and job is the most important issue. So is the economy stupid again in Korea? But for some voters, North Korea policies is a very important issue. And both candidates announced that they are going to put in more efforts to resume inter-Korean dialogue if they are elected. But one candidate is probably a little more conditional in terms of resuming the inter-Korean dialogue than the other. So there is a slight difference there. Foreign policy issues are not usually the deciding issues in presidential elections. But this time there is a slight difference between the FTA agreement between Korea and United States, for example. So that might become an issue. I'll open to questions. And then before I move to North Korea, I want to say very briefly that the Korean popular music, or K-pop, is becoming very popular in many countries, including Australia, especially among the younger generation. And the song called Gangnam Style, sung by a singer called Psy, is really catching on, and it had like 200 million YouTube hits so far. And Psy came to Sydney 3 weeks ago, and hundreds of people gathered around to celebrate his visit to Australia. And I can tell you that I don't belong in that generation, so I'm just relaying the news I heard from my junior staff. So I guess that younger generation here in the audience know what I'm trying to say. If not, then you lost me there. Okay. So, North Korea. The Korean Peninsula is a very unique place from a geostrategic point of view. Traditionally, it is described as a dagger that can stab Japan, or lips that can protect the teeth, that is China. So that probably illustrates the strategic importance of the Korean Peninsula. Actually, North Korea is still described as lips protecting the teeth, China. And 2012 is also an important year for North Korea because they're having a new young leader who is 20-something and who became the leader when his father died September 17th last year. And it's been 60-something years for the existence of North Korea. They only had 3 leaders, all in the family, and this new leader came to power. So this is a big thing, and we are all watching very carefully whether he's consolidating his position smoothly. And tentative verdict is this. So far, the Kim Jong-un, the name of the new leader, Kim Jong-un seems to consolidate his power smoothly. And actually it is proceeding faster than some thought. And he is trying different styles. But when it comes to policies, we can't really say this or that about his policies. We'll have to wait and see. So who is Kim Jong-un, North Korean leader? As was the case and tradition with North Korean leader, not much is known about the North Korean leader. When you think about George Orwell's 1984, there is a Ministry of Truth. And when somebody is politically purged, and then Ministry of Truth will write new history of the state. And I think that this kind of things is actually happened in North Korea, is happening in North Korea. So we thought that Kim Jong-un was like born in 1984, but they say it's born in 1982. We think because his grandfather, the founder of the nation, was born in 1912, and the second leader, his father, was born in 1942. So it's 2 and 2. So 1982, sounds about right. So that's probably why. That's my guess. And his mother is actually is one of those Korean, Japanese community members who came back to North Korea to settle down. And she was born in Japan, but she came to North Korea, married to Kim Jong-il, and bore him 2 boys and a girl. And the new leader is not the first boy, but second boy. And there is another boy, so he is a little boy actually, out of 3, the most junior one. He attained some schooling in Switzerland for 7 or 8 years in the junior high and high schools. And then he is imitating his grandfather's image, including his retro hairstyle. And the world now knows that he is married to a stylish young woman, and her name is Lee Seol-Joo. It was officially announced by North Korean government. I'm saying this because it is the first time, first time in North Korea. So it so happens everywhere in the world, but it was the first time in North Korea. And this is one of the new styles that he is trying. Kim Jong-un was made as official successor in 2010. So he had less than 2 years to become successor after his father's death. We all think that his father's death was probably a premature one. But Kim Jong-un seems to be doing okay. What has happened so far? He swiftly took over all the important titles. For example, the first secretary of the party, first chairman of the National Defense Commission, which is a supreme organ of the state, and supreme commander of the military. And in deference to his father, he didn't take up the title of, for example, general secretary. He created new title, first secretary, and he became first secretary, and leaving general secretary vacant permanently for his father. And he reshuffled the military and power elites, and especially the military empowerman Lee Young-ho was removed very suddenly. And it was announced that it was for health reasons, but a couple of days ago, North Korean government announced that he was removed because he was not loyal enough to the state. So he seems to be doing okay, but is he really in charge? That's the million-dollar question. And we are still waiting for a good information about forming the judgment. Definitely he seems to think that he is in charge. And why? I thought that it's a matter of Kim family going through 3rd generation succession, and this Kim, Junior Kim, never experienced hardships, never had to really fight for anything. So it's more like a 3rd generation, kind of, how can I put it, a junior person taking over, and he doesn't worry too much about his position because he was always at the top, and he was born with silver spoons. And so he seems to think so, but we still are waiting for the answers to the question of how secure his position really is. And in terms of policies, so far his track record is not quite positive, especially in terms of nuclear weapons and the military policies. He fired a long-range missile on 13th of April this year. And of course, North Korea called it a satellite launch. But it was a failure. But for the first time, he directed in the direction of south rather than east. So debris was supposed to come down in the waters between the Philippines and Australia. And then he amended the constitution to proclaim North Korea as officially a nuclear weapon state. This is not good. He continues the constructions of light water reactors and continuous construction of nuclear programs. And we have lately a press report that indicates there is a movement that might presage another launch of long-range missiles, which is very, very bad news for us all. Human rights situation is still very horrific and horrible. Economic situation is very dire still, although their food production this year was a 10% increase over the last year, so they'll be probably better off. And they'll be probably because they acquired their fertilizer from China, and also they have a relatively good weather this year. Now, the couple of things we are watching very carefully, that is, whether Kim Jong-un will visit China. China is the almost a only and sole benefactor to North Korea these days. Last year, 89% of North Korea's trade was conducted with China. When a country conducts your trade, almost 90% with one country, that's a staggering figure. That's almost incredible figure. And that really represents the depth of dependence that North Korea gets into it in its relations with China. And I don't think North Korea likes it very much. But in any case, we have a new leadership in China, and if Kim Jong-un visits China, I think China will probably help encourage North Korea to adopt the kind of economic policies that have been so successful in China. And that's a positive thing for all of us. So that's a good thing. And also, China is adamantly opposed, especially a nuclear test by North Korea. North Korea went through two tests already, 2006 and 2009. Another test is a real no-no, and China is adamantly opposed. So while this prospective visit to China is in prospect, or is dangling before a North Korean leader, I hope that will persuade North Korea not to go for another nuclear test. And with President Obama's re-election, North Korea might want to throw another charm offensive towards the United States. And maybe North Korea also wanted to diversify the diplomatic assets to get close to Japan. And as a matter of fact, North Korea and Japan held a first official talks in 5 years in recent times. But unfortunately, Japan will go for elections 16th of December, and all predictions are telling us that Liberal Democratic Party and the leader Abe Shinzo will become prime minister, and Abe Shinzo is the hardliner on North Korea. So much for the prospect of more dialogue between North Korea and Japan. How much time do I have? Okay. I just want to talk about bilateral relations. I've spent a lot of time in the two areas, so I'll be rather brief. So I talked about Korean War. 17,000 Australian soldiers came to Korea and suffered 340 casualties, and 43 still missing in action. And Korean people are eternally grateful to the contribution of the Australian people, and that's the starting point of a strong bond of friendship between our two countries always. But now the relations have grown into a very mature, comprehensive partnership, economically, politically, and militarily, and also working together as middle powers in this region. Economically, Korea is number 3 export market for Australia and number 4 trading partner. And Australia also is the number 5 trading partner for Korea. So in other words, two countries are very, very important trading partners to each other. In spite of the global financial crisis, with one hiccup in 2009, trade grew with a very strong momentum and is recording an all-time high. Recorded all-time high last year. It's going to record all-time high this year again. Last year, $35 billion two-way trade, and Korea accrued $18 billion deficit because we import a lot of natural resources and mineral resources from Australia. And as a matter of fact, 1/3 of mineral resources Korea requires comes from Australia. And also in terms of natural gas, Australia will become #1 supplier very soon. Investment, Korea is a relatively newcomer, but upward momentum is very strong. And last year, we recorded all-time high. And this year, for the 6 months of this year, actually surpassed the record of last year. So not very, very big, but Korean companies obviously are very, very interested in investing in Australia, especially in Western Australia. Okay. Right. Educational links is something I'd like to briefly touch upon. We have 30,000 Korean students studying in Australia. This figure went down a little bit because of strong Australian currency, but still very, very strong. And Korean students are third largest overseas students group in Australia. And coming back to Korea, they'll become a human bond between our two countries. I want to share with you a story of the franchise restaurant that's most popular in my country. The franchise restaurant is called Outback Steakhouse. Outback Steakhouse is my two boys' favorite restaurant. So whenever we have my boys' birthday, we go to Outback Steakhouse. When you go to Outback Steakhouse, we usually order something like Bushman's bread, Queensland pineapple juice, and tuumba pasta, and all kinds of steaks. And so Korean people really love this franchise restaurant, thinking that they serve Australian beef, thinking that they are Australian flagship restaurants. I thought so until I came here. It turned out that this is actually American franchise. One very creative American entrepreneur founded these franchise restaurants, and they set up shops in many countries, but especially in Korea, they became very, very, very successful. Why? Part of the reason was that the American beef has some bad reputation because of the BSE problems, and Aussie beef is marketed towards Korean consumers as Australian clean beef. So I'm a consumer of Australian clean beef myself. So this is really a plus for advertising, and thinking that this is a good Aussie steakhouse. Even today, many Korean clientele they go to this restaurant. That really says something about Korean people's perception about Australia. So I want to share this story with you. Well, security and defense. But this is not quite well known, but actually we are cooperating very closely in the military area. For example, from last year, whenever Korea and US they conduct joint exercises, Australia is getting the greatest access. So that tells the strength of the cooperation. And this year only, the first joint naval exercise was held off the coast of Korea. And the first talks between the two armies was held. I must add that the talks between the two air forces and two navies have been held for some time. But talks between two armies were held. And also we have annual foreign ministers meeting, annual defense ministers meeting. We are pursuing 2+2 ministerial meeting. If that happens, it will be the second for Korea, because we only held once a 2+2 ministerial meeting with the United States, which is our only treaty ally. And for Australia, it will be like 5th or 6th. And strategic middle power cooperation. Well, the first time I was personally exposed to Australia as a diplomat was back in 1991, when Korea hosted APEC, third APEC ministerial meeting. That was a very big thing for Korea at the time. At that time, there was the summit-only ministerial meeting for APEC. And APEC was the product of joint initiatives of two leaders of our two countries back in 1989. And Korea, as chair, conducted the negotiations to bring in three Chinese economies, that is PRC, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And against very long odds, somehow we succeeded, basically because Taiwan wanted to come in and PRC wanted to come in as well. So they came in. That was even before Korea had any official relation with PRC. So that was the first step in the direction of my country and China beginning the secret negotiation that resulted in the establishment of official ties in 1992. And since we fought a war during the Korean War, it took us 4 decades. So that was a very important diplomatic event for me personally as well as for country. But so APEC was a product of Korea and Australia. And G20, East Asia Summit, all the important forums where our two countries as middle powers are cooperating very, very closely. I want to emphasize to you that EAS is very important, and it was created thanks in large part of Australian contribution. And G20 also is very important. And I cannot name 2 other countries which have the greatest stake in the success of G20. So we have to work very hard to make it happen, make it stick. Sorry, I didn't keep time. And I have a couple of other issues like rebalancing or the global financial crisis. If you're interested, you can ask me questions. I'll cover those issues in our Q&A session. Thank you very much.
I'm sure he could have gone on for much longer and very interesting for us as well. But I think we do have time for some questions. One of the questions I would like to ask you was in fact on one of the pages you didn't get to. So what is Korea's attitude towards rebalancing and the pivot? In Australia, we have a different attitude because there are various strands of opinion in Australia about where we're going with this. But looking from a Korean perspective, what are the main issues you see in that, and related to potential containment of China?
Well, that's the issue of the day for many countries in this region, and Korea is no exception. And we are actually an immediate neighbor of China, and the US is our only ally. So for Korea, the US rebalancing or pivot to Asia is only good news, because we believe that US pivot will help maintain the balance rather than undermine the balance. So for us, it's all positive thing. At the same time, of course, China is our greatest, the biggest trading partner. And China is also important in our efforts to reunify the whole Korean Peninsula. So no need to say that we have to cultivate and nurture our relations with China. And maintaining strong alliance with the US and trying to nurture relations with China. Well, we talk about whether this is possible or contradictory, or what is the balance. But I think at the end of the day, this is something that we must do, like Korea must do. We have no other choice. And we are better off, and Korea is better off having US as our allies, the keeping sustained interest in the developments in this region. And I think China has a history, thousands of history of conducting a rather sophisticated diplomacy themselves. So they understand what we are trying to do, as long as we find a way to do things in our common interests. So we always must guard against the possibility of conflict and competition, or rivalry getting out of control. But I think China is mature enough, US is mature enough, and as Hillary Clinton said, Pacific is big enough for having 2 countries. We don't worry too much about it. If that doesn't happen, that will be a failure, a colossal failure of diplomacy for Korea, for Australia, for so many countries. But again, I believe that China and the US have a substantial stake in continuing to join in the prosperity in this region, and it's the task of policymakers, foreign policymakers in all our countries to find a way to keep it that way. In English, I came to know the word better half. In Korea, women are actually better half. And in our tradition, women actually control the family finances. They really did all the work to give good education to the children. So we love to say that actually Korean women were creators of Korea's economic development by sacrificing themselves and giving a good education and leg up to their children, right? So Korean women have always been very capable. Well, that's something special for my country because golf. Many Korean people in my generation thought that men or women, would have hard time competing against professional golfers from other countries. But one Korean woman golfer, Park Geuen-Hee, somehow decided to, give it a try in the USLPGA. And then in the first year, she made a debut in the USLPGA, actually won, one major, US Women's Open. And it was a dramatic win. Went through the 18 holes because they were tied at the end of the 72 holes. And it was so special because it happened when Korea was in the middle of a very painful financial crisis. So we were down and out, and many people were so frustrated. For the first time in 20 years, many of these people just were fired and out of jobs, and then some Korean men didn't bring themselves up to tell their family and their wives that they were fired. So they just, go on coming out of the house and stayed in the park the whole day and coming back. And after the cover was blown, some decided not to come back home at all, and they decided to sleep over the subway stations. I mean, all these stories were happening around us, and Park Geuen-Hee won this major championship. So it was more than sports at that time. So many of the young girls, and we have a Korean English word called Park Geuen-Hee kids. Park Geuen-Hee kids are those young girls in their 5, 6, 10 years old watching Park Geuen-Hee triumph and decided to try their fortune in the game of golf. That is why we have so many women golfers these days. Okay, about your second question, that's a valid question, and we have a tradition of favoring men, and not all Koreans are very proud of that. And we believe that boys and girls should have equal chance. And as you said, the girls sometimes feel much better. For example, last Saturday, one of the world-renowned Korean soprano, Sumi Cho, came to Sydney also, but came to Canberra on Saturday and gave a wonderful performance. And I was the beneficiary of that because I was, had a good time with the Governor General and Chief Minister of ACT. So what I'm saying is that there are all kinds of different people in Korea. There are some that have very antiquated and outdated ideas, but that doesn't really represent the Korea. And surely, certainly, that really doesn't represent the Korea of the future. Okay, sunshine policy, right? Yes. Well, sunshine policy can mean many things, but central theme of sunshine policy came from the Aesop fables, right? So it's not the wind but sunshine that will take the other person to take off the coat. That was, simply put, the rationale for the sunshine policy. So when you see that North Korea took off their coat and didn't take off their coat, and if you judge that they didn't take off their coat, so in central theme, sunshine policy was not entirely successful. And I think that sunshine policy even with some of the progresses that have been made, was not entirely successful in achieving the central goal. I think that's fair to say that. And second question was into Korean dialogue, was it?
Yeah, will it be resumed in the Korean summit?
Okay, we have two major candidates in the presidential race, and both of them announced that they are interested in holding inter-Korean summits. There are slight differences in terms of the process leading up to the summit, but both of them basically said they are eager to have the inter-Korean dialogue back on, and also they will pursue inter-Korean summits. So this is something that will be the part of the game when the new government comes in. And the Korean people's perception of unification. Well, it's Korean people believe that we are one nation. So even if we were separated over 6 decades, we speak the same language. There are some new words that we have to learn, but it doesn't really prevent us from communicating with each other. When I met the North Korean diplomats in the context of six-party talks, I had to learn some new words, but it was no obstacle for me to communicate with North Korean diplomats. So we are one nation. The sense of one nation is there. So in that sense, I think unification is still something that we must do, rather than we have choice about whether we do it or not. And then we have a question of cost of unification, especially appealing to some young people in my country, and their voice is to proceed with unification in such a way as to preserve the wealth or preserve the growth momentum of South Korea's economy. So there might be some slight differences. And then I think this is what I think, and it's really a matter of how you phrase your question. So depending on the way you phrase your question, you get answers more yes or no, or more no than yes, about how strongly you want unification, or how fast you want unification. But definitely and fundamentally, Koreans are one people. The sense is still there. So when opportunity presents itself, I'm sure that Korean people will choose to go for unification.